hear the crickets over there.
Yeah, all the birds outside. Like I said, it's better that than the dogs barking all constantly the whole time. So
There you go.
and it's nice enough that I could sit out here on the porch. So
all right. Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the weekly podcast where we discuss business, sports, politics, and whatever's on our mind. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. I'm also the author of The Discipline of Now, 12 Practical Principles to Overcome Procrastination. Joining me as always is the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Hello, all.
All right, good stuff. And we have a special guest with us this evening. We will introduce her momentarily. Before we do that, Ted, what's been going on in your world with this quarantine and pandemic and all that good stuff?
Man, I don't even know what day it is sometimes, man. Yeah, my time is off, my days are off. I just kind of go with it. Man. But I mean, I'm doing well. I'm thankful, family's good. So it's just kind of taking everything, one day at a time. I got a new refrigerator today. I thought I'd share that.
Got a new refrigerator.
A new refrigerator. It has nothing in it but drinks. So I'm gonna go out and take one of those essential trips and fill it up with some good stuff, some good quarantine stuff, ice cream and stuff like that, and salad.
There you go. You're living healthy.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's good stuff. As you can see, this is not your everyday podcast. You can find us on the 30minutehour.net. That's our website. You can get all the recent episodes. You can see the videos. We're now doing this live, and we're available on your favorite podcasting platform. For those of you that are watching us right now, feel free to chime in if you've got questions for us. If you have comments, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll be paying close attention as we move forward. Well, Ted, I've got something that's on my mind.
Please share, Eric.
Thank you. So, Ted, and this really ties into our guest, who we're going to introduce momentarily. I want to talk about, what do you do when you feel stuck? That's what we need to talk about. What do you do when you feel stuck? And we have a lot of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, business leaders, and you get to that point when you feel stuck. So let's talk about, what do you do when you feel stuck? So the other day, there was this entrepreneur. His name is Ed, and he's walking down the street. He's getting some exercise. He's thinking about his goals. He's thinking about his dreams. He's thinking about what he's going to do when this lockdown is lifted. He's so focused on his plans, he's not paying attention to the path that's in front of him. And he falls into this hole. Falls into a hole. And to make matters worse, it's starting to rain. And the water is now at his ankles. So he's stuck in this hole. It's starting to rain. But then Ed looks up and he's in luck, because now there's a therapist that's walking past the hole.
Wow.
Help! Get me out of here. I'm stuck in this hole. So the therapist, she hears him. She comes by and she sits down at the hole, and they start the dialogue. She says, so tell me, if you knew the answer to getting out of the hole, what would that answer be? So they're having this dialogue. They're going back and forth. Then finally, the alarm on her phone goes off. Beep, beep, beep. Time's up. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to leave you. I'll send you the bill, and I'll check back with you next week if you're still stuck in this hole. She gets up. She walks off. So now that the rain is getting up to his knees, he's in this bad situation. He's in the hole. Ed looks up, and he's in luck. because now there's a doctor that's walking by the hole, got his lab coat and everything on. Doc, help, get me out of here. I'm stuck in this hole. So the doctor, he comes, he sits down by the hole, and he starts asking him questions. So tell me, how does it really feel to be stuck in a hole? How long have you had these whole symptoms? So they're having this back and forth dialogue, and finally the doctor whips out a sheet of paper and writes something on it. So here's your prescription for your whole symptoms. Take this, and then I'll check back with you next week if you're still stuck in the hole. Gets up, walks off. So now he's really getting desperate because the water is up to his thighs. But he looks up and he's in luck. He sees his friend Frank walking by the hole. Help, Frank, you got to get me out of here. I'm stuck in this hole. So Frank, he looks down for a second and he jumps in the hole with him. What'd you do that for? Now we're both stuck, Frank. Great idea. Thanks. And here's what Frank said, and it has everything to do with our conversation today. Ed, settle down. See, I've been stuck in this hole before. Follow me. Let me show you the way out. So that's the key, Ted. So there's two main points I want you to get from this. There's 2 points that our followers should take away, and this has everything to do with our guest. Believe it or not, I know you're like, where is he going with this? But there's 2 main points.
Well, I want to know how they got out the hole. That's what I want. He knows. Frank knows how to get out. I mean, how'd they get out the hole?
Frank knew the way out. He had been stuck in the hole before. Let me get to the point. This will really clear it up for you, Ted. I know you're on the edge of your seat here. So
I am on the edge.
Here's the first point. Here's the first thing to remember from that little story I told you. Number one, when you feel stuck, you have to keep looking up. Right? His luck changed every time he started to look up. When you get stuck and you're frustrated and you're down, it's much harder to see the answer or to find an answer or to find someone that can help you with the answer. Right? Here's point number 2. When you feel stuck, you have to find someone who's already climbed out of the hole that you find yourself in. Like, for example, on this podcast, Ted, I mean, you and I have been in a whole lot of business situations over the years. We've been stuck in many holes: financial holes, hiring holes, personnel holes, you name the hole, trying to start a podcast hole.
Right.
You name the hole, we've been stuck in it. So we can jump in and help some of our viewers, some of our listeners to find their way out. But that leads to our guest today. And I told that whole story for a reason, because our guest, she has over 30 years of experience as a successful entrepreneur. And she's more than qualified to show you the way out. Let's go ahead and bring her into this conversation. So, and I had the pleasure of meeting her several years ago when I spoke in front of her title company. She was extremely professional and just 100% on point. And had the pleasure of being on her show for entrepreneurs. We'll talk about that here. But several years ago, she transitioned from college into the corporate world. Her mom decided to open up her own business. Like any new startup, she needed cheap help. And of course, being family, our guest was all in. She helped nights, weekends, holidays, and eventually taught herself the operations of the business. And so in 1988, her mom retired and I guess took over the business all on her own. And there were a lot of bumps and there were a lot of successes. I'm sure she was stuck in quite a few holes of her own. She can tell us all about that as we start talking to her. But the mission was always constant. Take the best personalized care of every single person on her team, and to teach them to take amazing care of the customers. It's really that simple. We seem to complicate it sometimes, but that's very simple and that's really on point. So as the head of her own business for more than 30 years, she learned the challenges business owners face, particularly small business owners. But she also saw the opportunity. She went on to sell her business in 2018 and transitioned into coaching, training, seminars, and hosting like-minded entrepreneur collaborations and working directly with teams and owners to strengthen and help them to grow their business. Now, she also hosts a regular broadcast where she shares advice to current and aspiring entrepreneurs to help them to grow their business and develop their passion. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-Minute Hour podcast, Connie Huxa.
Thank you very much, Eric. I really appreciate you inviting me. This is really exciting.
All right. It is an honor and a privilege to have you on our podcast. And I just wanted to kind of go off script a little bit. We're talking about being stuck in holes.
Mm.
Can you relate to that? I know you've just had a lot of experience and all the ups and downs. How does that resonate with you, this whole idea of being stuck in holes and finding people to help you get out?
You know, I learned one of the hard things. Again, thank you so much for having me on today. This is really exciting. And to meet you guys, as Eric said, I've known him for quite a while. But just to be able to do this and share stories is so inspirational to me that you guys are doing this, because these kinds of concepts are the things that, you know, getting stuck in holes and not being able to figure out how to navigate through them, and feeling like you're the only one out there, you know, like nobody else has these problems. And unfortunately, entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs, even entrepreneurs that have been in their business for a long time, sometimes feel like, okay, nobody else is having this problem, so I don't want to share it because then I look weak or not successful, or that I can't figure it out, which is absolutely the opposite of the truth. The one thing that I love that you guys are doing this is you're sharing stuff where people can understand that they're not the only ones going through it. And there's so many people out there that want to help you. And one thing that I love that I've heard when I talk to entrepreneurs a lot is that, you know, what you need to do is find someone that you can see who's already done it and ask them how to do it. And 9 times out of 10, that person immediately jumps on in the hole with you, as in your story, and will not only show you the way out, but show you how to continue to make sure you don't fall back in the hole again. You know, and those mentors or coaches or people that you lock arms with, those people are going to be with you forever. And there's constantly different people that you add to that box of jewels that you have. And you have to not be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely. And again, I've said this before. I think sometimes as entrepreneurs and leaders, our greatest strength can be our greatest weakness, right? Because we think, okay, I've got this. I'm going to charge through. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to find a way. But sometimes you have to stop and say, you know what? I don't know the answer.
Well, and then even when you do think you know the answer and you charge ahead, sometimes you get deeper in the hole because you are already in the hole and you think you know the way out. And instead you're, you know, digging farther down in. And when, if you had asked for help or asked for just thoughts or advice or bounce something off of someone else, it would have been so much more successful. But we do, unfortunately, we have a lot of weight on our shoulders because everybody thinks that we know how to do everything. And so then we think that we should know how to do it. And so we just push through. And sometimes that's the right answer. But most of the time it's not. Most of the time you get to look for people that have already done it.
You know, one thing that I often say is, I know enough to know that I don't know enough.
Yeah.
That is a fact. That is an absolute fact.
So always can learn from someone and just get, like you said, some of those jewels that may be out there, and you just have to, you know, be open to and let yourself be vulnerable to ask those questions to people.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yep. So Connie, tell us about your journey. Now, I know you started in business with your mom. I mean, prior to that, did you have any aspirations to have your own business or be an entrepreneur?
Good Lord, no. I went to college for, I don't know, 8 months, and they and I agreed that it wasn't a good fit, and they, you know, told me it would probably be good for me to go home. So I did, and it was not a good fit for me at all. You know, some of us know our weaknesses, and you know, they thought maybe it would be a better idea if I left, and I agreed with them. And so yeah, I bumped around for a couple different things. I worked in a medical association for a long time. You know, I kind of liked it. I mean, it's just a regular employee. And then my mom actually worked for a real estate investment company for a long time in Virginia. So I worked there for a little while, learned some stuff, learned some work ethic, grew up a little bit, those kinds of things. And when she opened her company, I just did the thing that, we all always do is, just helped out. I'd go down on weekends and nights, and when I was off work or holidays or whatever, and work, and basically did teach myself that business, because she just was at that point where she was just starting out and really needed help. And even at that point, I'm not even sure the whole entrepreneur idea even meant anything to me. Even at the point where she decided she was going to transition out, I was like, oh, this is cool. She's giving me her company, right? And it wasn't that at all, right? So I had to really learn not only how to do it my way and keep evolving things and be fresh and continue to learn and work with people, but also like I didn't walk in with like I had to create a business plan and a budget and all those kinds of things. So I didn't even know what I was doing, really. I mean, she taught me some of that, but it was sort of already set up. So later, as things transitioned and changed and we hit some of these pitfalls, I had to go back and like sort of reinvent things. And then I was sort of like, oh, I guess I'm sort of the business owner here, and I have to figure out how to do these things and make this work. So it's sort of a little bit weird than different and unusual than most people's journeys, because I sort of back-ended it a little bit. But as I started doing that, then, honestly, the entrepreneur sides just started budding. It's like getting into a job that you really like or you really don't. You either like it or you don't. And when I started doing it, it was like, wow, now this is kind of cool. I just, of course, like everything else, it has bumps, but it definitely energized me when I started inventing things myself that weren't things she had done, and creating processes and doing different things with my team and doing different things with our customers. Even she would say, oh, I wouldn't have thought of doing that. And, it's just different personalities and people, but I found myself super energized as those things started developing. And then I thought, wow, I can do all kinds of stuff. And then, I let the horses out.
Let the horses out. So can you describe for our followers the specific type of business, who your customers were, kind of the nature of your business?
Sure. So I own a title company, and a title company is the company that, what most consumers see is the company where you go and sign all the papers when you're buying your house. A title company is so much more than that. I mean, we do a lot of research and work beforehand to coordinate all of the parties involved and make sure everything comes together like it's supposed to. But we also search the records of that property and make sure that the property is in fact 100% owned by the people that are selling it, that there's no one that has any ownership interest that maybe needs to be addressed, which happens more frequently than you would think. And then after the closing, we sort of get everything back to where it belongs, get the documents recorded to make sure the ownership is complete. And we actually insure the ownership of that property. So the buyer purchasing it actually receives an ownership interest insurance that guarantees that they own that property and no one else can take it away from them. So we would do all of that. So we, as to the customers, our customers were everybody, the buyers, the sellers, the realtors, the lenders. The buyers are the ones that pay the title company's work most often. And so that's who we really are most addressed to. But everybody involved in the transaction has a piece of it, and we're busy coordinating all of those pieces and making sure everybody understands what's going on. Everybody knows if something comes up. All of the certifications are done. Everything's coming in at the right time. So, we're sort of the last ones pulling all the pieces together and making sure that when we're ready to sit down and do that, that it's all taken care of. So customers can be any of those people, any and all of those people.
Okay. So, and then you had the experience of being in business with family. And this is a question I get all the time, so I'll let you. If there's someone that's watching this and they're considering going into business with a family member, what advice do you have for them?
Well, it depends on who in your family, but I will tell you that going into business with my mother is very much an A personality lady, very strong woman. She owned at the time when she started the very first title company in our particular area, in the Tri-County area in Southern Maryland. She was the first title company, and then certainly the first woman-owned company. And so she had pretty much an uphill battle. And so that was a little bit of a challenge as well, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of thoughts and opinions and that kind of thing. And then when I joined her, first of all, she's my mom and she's got a very strong personality. And I was just helping out, right? I was just the weekend help or whatever. And then as she needed me more and I learned more, my mom and I are very close, but she's also a very strong personality, and I'm a little bit of a strong personality too. So the one thing I'll say is, for us, we had to learn very quickly, and I didn't live at home at the time, so that wasn't a problem, but we had to learn very quickly that separation between work and home. Absolutely. I mean, I never called her mom. We were two individual people. I had to remember it was a totally different type of respect, because she knew all of these things I was trying to learn. And so I had to learn that. She also had to learn the respect for what I was bringing to the table. And so we had a lot of those ups and downs. But the biggest thing, if I could tell anyone, any advice, is separate work and home. Never, ever you don't have conversations at home about work. You're not at a family picnic and you talk about it unless there's an emergency. And if so, you pick up and you move over sideways and you say, all right, I need to talk about this for now. And then boom, it's off. Because otherwise you don't have a life, and neither one of you can separate and have that family tie that you had all along.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you addressing that, because I mean, that's something I see that's a challenge for a lot of people, and hopefully they can kind of go in intentional, knowing that they have to separate. That's what they're thinking of doing. So
Connie, just on that, do you think that it would be that situation would be the same if it were a situation where, let's say, you hired someone that was not part owner, right? Like that was a family member. So say if it's a cousin or some other relative that kind of just joined the organization, I guess would you go with the same philosophy or approach to that?
Well, one of my other rules in business was always that I never became personal friends with any of my employees. I never became out of work friends. And I broke that rule one time. And when I did, it was very difficult. It caused a lot of problems, both with all the other employees and with myself and with that person. Our personal relationship got in the way of our business and vice versa. And it became very toxic. So the one thing I'll say about that is, hiring someone that's a family member, you have to be very careful, number one, of how it works with all the other people that work for you, because they trust and respect you too. And then you have is there favoritism? You have to be extra careful that there's not. And then you're uncomfortable because you're trying to do this, fight this kind of mindset when you're trying to run a business that's already plenty enough work. So I would really have, if I was going to do that, I'd really have to have a good sit down with that person about what I expected, how things were going to work, very much the separation of personal and business.
No, that's really interesting, because oftentimes I see individuals that come to me and want to ask about starting a business, and they have a family member with them or a good friend with them. Mm-hmm. And I've experienced that as well. And you're right. It's very, I don't want to say you can't do it. When people say you can't do business with your friends and your family, I just said I guess what you're saying is you really got to draw those lines really tight, because things can go kind of crazy at some point.
Absolutely. I got really good advice from an attorney one time. We were going to start, my husband and I were going to start a business of somebody else. And he said, if you couldn't be married to that person and live with them 24/7 for the rest of your life, then do not go in business with them. And so that was interesting, because you have to, I think it's really drawing the lines very specific. And if somebody's going to come work for you, and maybe it's not even a family member, maybe it's a brother of your best friend, I think you're still in the same kind of boat. There's really expectations on both sides of that. I mean, you as the owner probably expect them to be more loyal. Them as that person may expect more favoritism. Or maybe none of that is true. Maybe the people that work for you think there's going to be favoritism. So now you're walking that tightrope. That's why I say I think it needs to be very defined, absolutely, between both people. But then also I think with the team that works for you. I mean, I really think that is a very much an open book. Here is, we've decided to take on Bill. He's my brother-in-law's brother, and I want you guys to all understand, here's the rules, here's what's happening, and set it out on the table so there's no question. I mean, the things that you don't talk about are the things that turn into something that they weren't.
Mm, good points. Really good
Yeah,
points.
very good points. Yeah, it looks like we've got someone that's typed in a comment, says it's definitely a challenge. It says his wife has been his corporate CFO for over 18 years. So that's interesting. That family dynamic can get really interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, think of husband and wife. You're going home and you've got, and then you got all these conversations about work. You can't ever let go, and you can't. And then you've got the struggle of the frustration of work, and you don't want to take that into what you've got at home. I mean, I just really think drawing lines is probably the most important thing. It's the only way you can stay sane. All of you.
Yeah.
yeah, so like it's funny. I know of a couple who they're in business together. They have what they call the sign rule, right? So when they drive past this sign, they're no longer allowed to talk
No
about
more.
business.
Yep.
they have to cut it off. Yeah.
Sounds good. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I mean, but those that kind of goes back to Connie's point. I mean, you really have to be intentional about creating those boundaries and not just go in blindly thinking that's automatically going to happen.
Yeah, because it's definitely not. Because the things you don't talk about are the things that turn into a thing.
Yes, absolutely.
No, that's really important because again, a lot of times when people are starting companies, they start businesses with people that they're close to, family and friends, right? And they only think that, hey, we're going to be successful, we're going to work together, it's going to be all such a harmonious relationship, and then business we know has its ups and downs, and it will definitely rock those personal relationships. So
For sure, absolutely.
Good help there.
So Connie, so you took over the business in 1988, and it's yours now. Like what were your initial goals taking over, and like how long did it take you to achieve them?
I'm not sure that I had initial goals at first. I mean, like I said, when it first happened, I was sort of like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like, I've been working for somebody else for all this time. Now I'm working for my mom, helping her out. And wow, I'm taking over this business. Like, I mean, honestly, I think it was pretty scary at first thinking, okay, now I have to make sure that all these things work. And I'm not even sure I understood at the time the huge weight of that, because I mean, I was just really doing what I knew how to do. I mean, I was managing the office at that point, and I was, I mean, I was sort of running things as it was, but I didn't really understand the magnitude of what was going on, because I was just doing what I was doing. And we were in a pretty good spot. I mean, my mom had done a really good amount of legwork, really had done a lot of networking, got in the community very involved. And so she had a lot of great connections, and, it was me. So that sort of went on about its way. What I started doing as I went, as I started developing my own personality in the business is I have a tendency to look at things like really big picture. So how can I be this little title company in Southern Maryland, and how can I take advantage of what some of these other bigger companies are doing? How hard could that be? And how could I grow us based on some of those bigger theories? And so I actually started going to some national seminars and learning what people were doing like out West, and bringing those kinds of concepts back and figuring out how to make those kinds of things happen in our company. And so we started doing a lot of things, just ancillary things for our customers that nobody was doing, because as most of us know, everything comes from the West, right? So California is where everything starts that's up and coming. And then I did some of that kind of stuff, and I mean, it doesn't sound like anything big now, but back then, I mean, we were starting to transition from giving people a whole lot of documents at closing to copying them onto a CD or copying them onto a flash drive, and I had to talk to my copier guy and say, I have this idea and I need a different kind of machine. I know you got to be able to put your hands on that. And he was like, well, I don't know that I have one of those, but let me see what I can do. And so it was sort of those kinds of things, because I always thought, like, there's got to be bigger ways to help people and grow this. And it wasn't just about the financial growth of the business. It was about offering more and being different and being bigger, our company being bigger in this little pond. And there was a lot of things that, I mean, I stumbled quite a bit, but there was a lot of things that we tried that really took hold, and people, started doing the same kinds of things. And so I was constantly trying to reinvent us to stay in front of the realtors that we would market to and the lenders we would market to, and come up with some different things that were beneficial to them that weren't the same old thing. I get bored. So, I mean, very honestly, as an entrepreneur, I get bored and I'm not afraid to try new stuff. And so I would do that a lot.
So like if you could go back in time into your time machine to when you first took over, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself based off what you now know?
I probably would sit down, understand. The one thing that I found so scary is, I think I said this earlier, is I didn't know what a business plan was. I didn't know what budgeting or any of that was. And the one thing I'll tell you is, taking over that business, my dad, when you talk about people working together, my dad was an accountant, a career accountant, controller for a car dealership. And so he did all of my mom's books. Well, my dad has always been very protective of us. Like, I'll take care of all the books and I'll make sure you have the money that you need. You don't need to know what you have, because he was always afraid, like, if you know it, you'll spend it. And so he was very like just protective that way. And so when I took over, I was like, all right, well, how do I know how much money I have? My mom's like, don't worry about it. Dad's taking care of it. And I'm like, I know, but how can I know what to spend if I don't? And so if I had advice for myself going backwards, there would be two things. One, I would make a business plan for myself, because that exercise, I think, is so important, that you understand what you really are trying to achieve and what you somewhat think you're going to need to get there. And then some budgeting stuff. I mean, I had some of those classes. I did go back and forth to college. I gave you that joke at the beginning, which was partially true, but then I took a lot of classes online. And so budgeting and accounting, I learned a lot of that stuff. So I taught myself. But had I known now probably what I should have known then, I definitely would say those are some things I really would start out with. I don't think you have to wait to budget to jump in the water, but I do think you need to not. I think a lot of people, when they first start out in a business, they go out and go, oh, okay, I'm going to be a photographer, so I need the most expensive camera, and I need a tripod, and I need mirrors and lights, and all these different things. When in fact, maybe you're not going to be the photographer that needs that big fancy camera. Maybe you need this other camera and some of these other accessories. So one of the pieces of advice I would say is jump in. Don't be afraid to jump in the water. Do it. As soon as you're, this is what you want to do, jump in the water. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Jump in, but work through it a little bit until you figure out exactly what you need. Build your plan out a little bit, just so you sort of have a little bit of a roadmap, and then make sure you have your budget set up so you know what you should be able to spend and what you shouldn't. I had no idea. I really had no idea.
I think it really does help, like you said, to just jump in. And I think everyone's journey is different. So I think it's really good for our listeners to hear that you had, started the whole, school thing, and then, that didn't work out, and then you jumped in, but then you said you've taken some training classes, and, I think all of that is just, I think, a friend of mine once said that everyone's journey is not the same, right? To get into, to being successful. And I just think that it's really important. And I think, the books will tell you, yeah, you got to start with the business plan, right? And you got to lay all this stuff out. But if you don't really know some of those things, the business plan can be intimidating to you. Right? You're looking at this, I got to come up with a marketing plan. I know nothing about marketing. I got to come up with a financial component, and that's not my thing. I just know I have an idea, right? And sometimes I think that, sometimes we can be so educated and all of that I think we put ourselves in a position where we can overthink it. And like you said, we make that mountain so high. And while there's some kid that sets up a lemonade stand outside because it's hot, and he makes a fortune selling lemonade, and he kind of starts creating the business plan on how to take it to the next level. Right? You get more out of it at that point. So I just think, I think there's so many different scenarios and just being an entrepreneur.
Well, let me qualify by saying I absolutely agree with you 100%. I am a firm believer of, if you have the idea and you've got the passion, and you got to jump in. Don't wait for the sun to be shining and all of the rays to be perfectly aligned, stars aligned, all of that. Do it. That's it. Don't wait for that. When I say business plan, my business plan idea isn't maybe quite as it's created like everybody else's. For me, a business plan is more like here's a roadmap. All right, so I'm really excited. I want to develop this software, and I want it to do this, and I want it to get this far by this day, and maybe I want it to make this much money, or I know in my head first 2 years, I'm going to be putting money in myself. That's okay. That's kind of what I mean. More of a roadmap instead of the complicated business plan, because I do think that's way too overwhelming for anyone who's ready to just jump in. And I want you to jump in. I'd much rather you jump in than have any idea what you're doing. I just feel like if I had known then a little bit more about what I was doing and what I thought I wanted to happen. I mean, I knew what to do with the business. I just didn't have a plan for how I was going to see some of that transition happen. And so a roadmap, just spelling that out for my own edification, would have been made a lot more sense to me.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. And so you eventually you decided to sell the business and make the transition into what you're doing today. What inspired you to sell the business and the transition into what you're doing now?
This story makes no sense whatsoever. So I had no plan to sell my business. And coming out of the housing market crash. So let me go back just a teeny bit, because, you know, one thing about that particular business, and a lot of business owners struggle with this, is, you know, when you talk about these like sinking in the hole and the pitfalls and those kinds of things, and everybody else around you seems to be going through the same thing. And sometimes you're thinking, oh gosh, is anybody else doing business right now? I mean, I hope that everybody's in this crash, and I hope everybody's feeling this struggle, right? And that's where you really start to self-doubt yourself, like, okay, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, and that kind of thing. And so that housing crisis was very tough on all of us in the real estate world. Absolutely. And, you know, I was really proud of us, because even though I was obviously at that point, I was doing my own budget for quite some time. You know, it was just not anything you could predict, just like what people are going through right now. And so having some plan that I knew I had some money set aside, because our business was built that way. It's just cyclical. And so having money set aside if something like this happened was always the way. So I was okay. We made it through the housing crash pretty, intact, let's say that. If that had gone on too much longer, we'd have probably been in a different situation. But, and coming out of that, you know, a title company is a decent place to be in a business. And, you know, I mean, we made pretty decent money, and we were able to pay our bills pretty well and take care of the people that worked for us very well. And so I guess it was a lucrative place for other people to be, because coming out of the crash, people started approaching me about buying the business. And I was like, wait, my business isn't for sale. Why? Well, okay, sure. And I've always had that. Anybody who knows me, this is a joke that I always say, but anything I own is for sale, except for my husband and my child. And every once in a while, they might be for sale too. It just depends on what's happening. So, I mean, with that adage, of course, everything I own is for sale. So, all right, well, I'm curious. Let's talk. And I talked to two different people, both of which were interesting propositions, but not for me. They just, you know, it just wasn't the setup that I needed. And like I said, I wasn't anxious to sell. So it wasn't like I was like, okay, I'm really hungry for whatever. So it got tabled for a couple of years. And then, for about a year, I guess. And then out of the blue, somebody messaged me, I think it was emailed me, and said, hey, would you be interested in talking about selling your business? Of course. And everything I own is for sale for the right setup. And so we met, and we met in February. By April, we had a contract. By August, it was sold. Right situation, right place, right time. You know, if I could go back and say, I can't tell you. I mean, I had no idea what to do either. I mean, I had never sold a business before. No, totally uncharted territory. But what I can say is this is another area where you have to not be afraid to ask questions, ask for help. Don't, you know, excuse me, I was under a non-disclosure. So of course I couldn't say, oh, I'm going to sell my business, but there's people that you talk to. I mean, my attorney, my accountant, I did actually reach out to a valuation specialist. I know somebody who had recently bought a business, and I said to her, how did you even know what to pay for that business? And so I asked questions. And so I got that advice. And so I learned to tap those resources that I hadn't been afraid to tap before about other things, just that use that same adage and went out and found those answers. So, you know, it wasn't a perfect scenario. It went really well. Some things sort of fell apart as it was going along. But, you know, I felt good that I did everything that I could do for my employees, for my business, and for my family. And yeah, so it was done in 6 months. It was pretty crazy.
So let me ask this question. how difficult was it for you to sell the family business?
You know, me and my mom had a long talk. Obviously, she had been out of it for a while, but she's always been my trusted advisor. I mean, when you talk about people that work on your team or that you have in your circle, my mom's always, whether she was the owner or not, she's always been the one that I go to for, big thought business kind of questions. And sometimes she would rein me in, and sometimes she'd be like, wow, I would never thought of that. That's a great idea. And so she was really a good sounding board. My husband's always been uh, just a regular guy who just methodical thoughts, doesn't own a business, just helped me stay grounded a lot. And so when this came up, I just individually went to both of them and said, all right, this is an opportunity. Here's why I'm thinking about it. Here is what I feel about it. I'm not really sure. But I will tell you that, like with anything, at some point in your life, maybe you just want to try something else. And we all think about that, even if you don't have any plans to sell your business. I mean, sure, I've thought, oh gosh, if I sold my business, I could do this, or I can't do this because I own this business that's, brick and mortar here. And so I let myself start thinking, wow, this could be kind of cool. I could try something different. I don't even know anything different. And so my mom and I sat and talked for a long time, and, really she was okay with it. I was okay with it. And I had grown so much that I really could consider maybe doing something else. And it wasn't as hard on me as I thought it would be. There were certain times that I thought were a little bit more emotional than I expected, but it didn't last long. Now, the one thing I'll tell you is the business is not the same as it was when I left. And that was a little bit hard at first because that business has a different reputation than it did when I was there, but it's not mine. So it took me a little while to get over that hump. I had to be there we had a workout agreement, and I was there for 6 months after the sale. And that was probably the hardest part for me. Working in that kind of environment was because I couldn't make any of the calls. Things weren't always going the way I would have done them. And things were happening because of it. And it was difficult. That was the hardest part, I think.
So let me ask you this. When you finally had the separation, right? Like, what was it like that first week of just totally being disconnected from something that you had been so connected to for so many years?
Because of the 6 months I had to stay on that were pretty volatile, it was like a party. So when I was gone, it was like a party. I was looking for that day. He even asked me to stay on, and I wouldn't because we just didn't see eye to eye on things, and I couldn't. It was really volatile, and I just couldn't do it. So for me, that might have been different than a lot of other people because of that scenario. Had you asked that right after it was sold and I had walked out the door then, I probably would have been pretty emotional about it because it would have been that separation. It was my company, and boom, all of a sudden, I'm out the door. But because I was there and I went through that transition, I was ready to go. I will say, though, going out of being an entrepreneur and not having like the next plan already in place, because I really didn't. I mean, I wasn't ready. I didn't have the for sale sign on the door. And so at first it was like, what value am I offering to the world? A couple months into it, like, what am I doing? What is going on? But that entrepreneur side kicks in again, and then you're back on the horse. But it is a little strange to go from, going into an office every day and having that regular career and having people that relied on you. And even though I complained about, I was happy to let employees to let that part of it go because it was a struggle for a while. I missed it because, nobody needed me. All of a sudden I wasn't important anymore.
Yeah. And I could see how that could be, as a business owner myself, I could see how difficult that can be if you own something and then now someone else owns it, and now they're in there wanting to paint the walls this color, wanting to change this, wanting to change that, taking out the ping pong table or bringing in the table. You're like, what in the world is going on? And you
and even personality. I mean, he didn't get along with some of the employees that I had there, and they would come to me and rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, I can't do anything. I
Right.
mean, I have no control over this. I mean, I did talk to him, and he did, but yeah, those were the painful kind of things. Is he just was doing things so differently, and people just didn't understand. Employees or customers, they just didn't understand. So that was difficult.
So you just watched the culture just do a 360 while you were there. It seems like that's tough.
Yeah, that's why when you said, "Well, how was it feel when you walked out?" It was a party. I was ready.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that definitely it will be helpful to a lot of our listeners that are business owners that may be considering selling or may think like, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm gonna start a company and I'm gonna sell it in 5 years. And I'm like, gee, that just sounds, I don't know if I could just put myself in that frame of mind like that. But some people, they put a business together with the purpose of selling it. And I guess they don't ever get, they know not to get too, personally connected to it. It's,
Well,
they
in that
know.
first 5 years, the machine, they're creating a machine, and they're creating something around an idea, and like you said, purposely aware that that's what they're going to do, so they don't get as emotionally attached to the people or the functionality of that business. That it's made to do exactly what it's doing. So probably it's just a different mindset. I don't know. I'm not sure I could do it either. I'm with you, but I guess it's just a different mindset.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
some of the entrepreneurs I work with, the struggle is they really haven't had a next step defined as far as, okay, I'm going to sell the business, but they didn't really have it. Like you kind of had it right. They're kind of like, now what do I do? Where you've got these clear next steps. I mean, I started watching the Coffee with Connie's. I started seeing the entrepreneurial podcast. You're coaching. You're doing training. How are your next steps so clear and well defined?
Well, I think some of that is because while I still owned my business, I would have people, that whole mentor kind of concept, reaching out to other people and ask questions about how they do it, was happening already. And so as this transition happened, I thought, well, shoot, if people are already asking for my thoughts about this, then why can't I develop this in a way that I can help all kinds of entrepreneurs and doing and growing and things that they want to do? And so I started doing it at first with title people, because one of the things that I started doing at first was Coffee with Connie was sharing about how a title company worked and what happens. And because one of the things that I learned in that business is no one in the world understands what we do except us. Clearly, a title company is one of the most misunderstood businesses out there. And we think we know what we need to tell you, and it's not at all what you want to hear. So I really started reformulating my conversations to people so that people understood what I knew. It wasn't really what a title company did, but what value I know. And what happened is people started asking me questions about that business. And they'd say, well, what about this? What about this? You're the one who knows all about real estate. And I had somebody come up to me in a local restaurant who I had never met before. Me and my husband were walking in, and the guy says, hey, you're that lady who talks about real estate on Facebook all the time. And I went, do I know you? And he said, nope, just keep doing what you're doing. I looked at my husband. I'm like, do you know him? And he said, no, I never met him. And I went, we're doing it right. It's working. So, so I started doing that. And then I started, just really working with other title companies, even when I still had mine, collaborating, because, one of the things a lot of successful businesses do is in industries is those industries that people that are successful in those industries, they collaborate with other people in the same industry and say, how, I hit this problem. What are you doing? And that kind of thing. And title companies really don't do that. And so I started doing some collaboration with other companies and saying, let's just get on a call and talk about employee struggles or, health insurance or, title underwriting problems, those kinds of things, just collaborating overall as business owners. And so we started doing that, and that was really successful. I had people on the call once a month that were from California and New York and all over, and it was really interesting to hear different points of view. And as that started to develop, I started doing, more of that kind of mentoring other companies. And then I had a friend in the industry who said, you got to stop giving all this information away. You should start charging for it. And I was like, I can't charge for this. This is just stuff I know. And then I thought, well, that's silly. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should be developing a business around this. And hence started my coaching. So I do, like you said, I do coach entrepreneurs. I work a lot with realtors and lenders. It's a sweet spot because I know their terminology, but I've worked with health coaches. I've worked with photographers, and just really helping them build strategies in their business, develop strategies for, growing their audience, developing strategies for next steps, developing strategies for building their team out a little bit stronger, things that I went through as a business owner, really. And so I do that. I do coaching. I do a regular live Facebook series, which sort of was just like everything else. What did we say earlier? You just do it when you think about it, you just do it. So 3 months ago, I said, maybe I really want to, I have a lot of contacts. I really want to start talking to entrepreneurs who, have figured it out. They're doing it. Why are they doing it? How are they doing it? What's going on? And let them share their stories, because there's so many people out there that just like that fell in the hole, right? And don't know how to get out. And so I put a call out to a lot of entrepreneurs I knew and said, hey, I want to interview you. It's just a 30-minute interview. I just want you to tell your story. That's all. And I had 48 people in 24 hours. And I said, oh, shoot, I now don't know what to do. Let me get all this together. And so, over the next 2 weeks, I sort of started developing what that was going to even look like. And Here we are. I don't know. I think we've had 42 of them maybe so far, and it's been a couple of months. So it's really been good. And honestly, it just sort of tied into the whole everybody stuck at home. So of course, why not get on a live broadcast and do it? But we started it before that, and it just sort of happened to be luckily good timing. So
Eric, that sounds like a familiar story, huh? How we kind of got the podcast going.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We were doing.
Well, you guys have been doing this for quite a while, though, haven't you?
Well, so we started a little over a year ago, and we were doing it primarily it was just audio, and we would do YouTube stuff here and there. But with this pandemic, we were forced out of the office we were doing it in because it was closed by the government. Yeah. So we figured, you know what, maybe we should get on Facebook Live. There's an idea. And instantly, I mean, the following just multiplied.
People love video, I swear. Yes. I mean, the more I did it, the more I saw people love video. If I, post a picture or a graphic, I get some play with it, but people love video. So I just keep playing with it.
And one of the best things about it, though, is we get to interview guests like you, and we're just like the listeners. We're able just to soak up those treasures, those nuggets that our guests share. And each story, there's some common, themes and some of the challenges, and but people started different ways, and you just kind of get to the same place. But everybody, just there's some core essential things that you see in all the entrepreneurs, and that's really cool to hear just different stories.
Yeah, Ted brings up an interesting point. So kind of, I know.
Thank you, Eric.
No, because one of the things, like I notice common things just from talking to all the entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you see that too. Like what are some of the common traits that you see in successful entrepreneurs?
So, and that's funny that you say that. And I was kind of laughing when Ted said that, because I was like, when I'm interviewing people, it's so cool to hear, they might say it a little different, but this concept of mentors and coaches is so relevant. And mentors are, you could be 30 years in your business, but you could still have somebody that you look to, and they may not be older than you. They may not have been in business longer than you, but maybe they've had some experience that you want to know more about. So you connect with them. I mean, my mom, when she ran the business and all of her years in business, never once had a business coach. I, over my 30 years, had 4 or 5. And those different coaches brought different nuggets to the business and taught me things that I taught them a lot, but they taught me different ways of looking at things to try to have more exposure. So that's a really common theme in the conversations I have with entrepreneurs. The other thing that is really a common theme that I love, and I think people don't talk about this enough, is when you want to start a business, as you guys were talking about earlier, just jump in, right? And you'll figure out the mechanics later. Absolutely true. But if you want to start that lemonade stand, what most people who've never done this before don't think about is you have to know how to count the money, and you have to know how to make sure you're doing it legally, and you have to make sure that you know how to do some marketing, or somebody does. So the piece of advice that I hear people say all the time, and that I absolutely would give too, is don't be afraid to spend money on the things that you don't know how to do that you have to have. You know, spend the money, get someone that you trust, that is a professional, that will do the things that you either don't like to do or you don't know how to do, because you'll end up getting in trouble. If you don't count your money right and you don't pay Uncle Sam, you're going to get in trouble. So spend a little bit of extra money, jump in and do what you want to do, and let somebody else take care of the pieces that you don't like to do or you don't know how to do, so you're doing it right.
No, that's a good point. You know, I think about when I first started the company, and you know, initially I was in IT. My company's an IT company, so I did hands-on IT stuff, right? So I'm thinking in my business, that's what I'm going to do, hands-on IT stuff. Once I really started getting into it, that's the last thing I do is hands-on IT stuff. Like I can't set up a printer. I can't do anything on my own computer right now, but my background is IT. But that's not even what I'm doing. I'm thinking marketing. I'm thinking strategy. I'm thinking, you know, how do you stretch money and make money? You know, I'm not, and I think that people need to really think about that of, okay, you may not be doing that thing, right? You make the pizzas right now, but once you start that pizza parlor, you may not be the one making the pizzas anymore. Right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, you bring up like coaching and mentoring, and like over the years, like I've invested in all kinds of coaches, and I've spent like money that I technically didn't really have just to get these coaches in my life. And I tell you what, I've never regretted it.
Yeah.
When I look back, every time it's really helped, and I still use things that I learned years ago from some of these. So I would encourage anybody out there to, you know, find the mentors, find the coaching. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a piece that you've got to have. And, you know, I think you bring up a good point. You know, you may start making the pizzas and then you don't make the pizzas later. There's two sides to that. Maybe you always want to make the pizza. Maybe you don't want to be the oversight, overseeing the mechanics of the business. That doesn't make you happy. Okay, well then bring in somebody that can help you do with those mechanics, because I think that's really important to understand what really matters to you. Maybe you're learning, like I did, how to be an entrepreneur. And once you start doing that, you're like, oh, I really like this even better. I don't want to do the closings. I don't want to make the pizzas. I don't want to make the lemonade. I want to run the business. Or maybe you do want to do that and you need somebody else that can help you run the business. So I think it's knowing your strength and knowing what you really want to do.
Awesome. So what upcoming projects do you have, Connie, that are on the horizon?
Well, I'm working on a couple of new things for our website, some additional tools, an ebook. I'm starting, you know, after I interviewed you, you said something that was so profound and that is really made sense to me, is building your legacy. You know, you did your book because you said something so profound. When you wrote your book, you were so proud that you have a book on the shelf that your grandkids later can always have a piece of you. And so I've been working on doing more of those kinds of things, some genuine pieces, because I really just didn't take time. I wanted to jump right in and start helping people grow their business and help people build their strategies. And I wasn't taking the time to build some of these other pieces. So I'm working on some additional pieces for our website, an ebook, a couple of different pieces, free downloads that people can do on some tips that we share when I do a live broadcast on Facebook that's just me twice a week, that's coaching with Connie, that's nuggets, you know, like things we're talking about here. And so I'm doing here's how to do live broadcasts, because even though everybody's watching people do Zoom calls, a lot of people will not do it themselves. And so, you know, some of those strategies on how to do that without being scared, and how to set it up so you know what to do. So I have several different things that should be launching on our website with probably in the next month or two. So I would ask people to subscribe to that and to our YouTube channel, because the YouTube channel is where you can see all of these interviews we've been doing. They're just fantastic, and they're only 30 minutes. So you might find something that's interesting, and subscribing to my YouTube channel, you make sure you wouldn't miss any of that. So I appreciate you asking.
That's great.
Fantastic. Yeah. So just give everybody all of the pertinent information. If they want to get contact you for coaching or what have you, please give them all the necessary website information so they can get in contact with you.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, my website's really simple, Connie Fuchsa. It's Connie, FUKSA.com, ConnieFuchsa.com. On my website, there's a whole section about coaching. There's a whole section about doing live broadcasts, things like that, because people ask me about that. There are lots of different tools that I use when we do broadcast resources and things. On YouTube, it's just Connie Fuchsa. On Facebook, it's just Connie Fuchsa. I'm on LinkedIn as well. All just Connie Fuchsa. I don't have separate personal and business pages because I personally feel like that spreads me a little bit too thin, and people can, maybe people wouldn't find my page who would see me personally. And so, I just have everything all together so you can easily find me that way on any of those areas. And you can see all those interviews on all three of those different mediums. They're also on my website as well, so you can click on them there.
Fantastic.
Hey,
So now, go ahead.
I want to ask one question we didn't ask you. We ask a lot of our guests. What's your normal day like? Like, how do you start your day?
Right now, I actually I'm going to be speaking to a business women's networking group on Wednesday, and they wanted me to talk about how do you stay motivated and how do you keep things going. And one of the things that I really set up is, and this may be redundant because some people are saying it, but you know what? No matter what I have going on that day, I get up at the same time. I get in the shower. I get dressed up. Even if I'm going to be doing broadcasts at my house, I'm going to work, if you would. And I go into my designated space. I don't sit on the couch. I don't sit at my kitchen table. And maybe your kitchen table is your designated space, but it's your space. And so I make sure that routine happens because then I'm more productive. I do set my schedule up, and I learned with a coach years ago. I used to feel like I had to be in work every single day at the same time as my employees, and I wasn't my most productive self. So what I started doing is on Mondays, I would work from home. So I learned the whole work from home a long time ago, and I was the most productive on those days because there wasn't any interference. There wasn't people coming in, asking questions, doing all kinds of things. And so I was the most productive me that day. So my schedule is sort of like that. Mondays is my development day, if you will. That's days when I develop my content. I'm sort of working my week out, new things that we're working on. That I do a lot of development on those days. I schedule interviews a couple of days a week that I do, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, but never all day. It's too exhausting for me, and I'm not my best productive self. And then with doing the interviews, as you guys know, there's a lot of the behind the scenes work. So I have to make sure I leave time for that kind of stuff too. Yeah, it's pretty much that. Monday's my development day. The other days I do interviews and then setups for interviews. And in between there, I set up coaching abilities. Usually my coaching clients I work with 1 hour a week, every week. And so we do some work together, and then they go home and do some homework together or by themselves. And then when we get back together, we go over that homework and then develop from there. So I'm developing those curriculums and working with them. And I usually only have no more than 3 coaching clients a week. And sometimes that is even too much if I'm doing interviews too. Just sort of depends on how many interviews I have going on.
So isn't that interesting that when you're talking about school, that you were like, oh, that's not really my thing. And then now you're teaching.
Yeah. My biggest problem is if I had to sit and write a paper, I would rather rip every single hair out of my head one by one. Writing and reading are not my thing. I can do it.
Yeah.
I just don't like, I really just don't like it. So I have to play a game with myself. When somebody asks me to write an article, I have to play a little game with myself about timing. So that's part of what that is. And reading, I thank God for Audible, because now I can consume, and that goes back to something that I would share that I learned with all these entrepreneurial interviews too, is keep learning. People keep learning, keep reading, keep hearing, keep listening. But Audible made that so easy for me. And now I listen to probably 4 or 5 books a month, just because I listen to them in the car all the time, or when I'm sitting at my desk, and sort of background, and I pick up information. But yeah, I keep learning. And so Audible has been my friend. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Good.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So we are at the part of the show where we're going to go around the horn, and each of us is going to leave that final closing thought. So we'll start with you, Connie. What's your around the horn thought for the people?
My around the horn thought is I talk a lot on my Coaching with Connie about failure. And I feel like a lot of people use failure as a term that's a negative term that, they feel like if they haven't completed something properly in time, they haven't gotten to where they wanted to be in that goal, that they failed. And the thing I want to share with you is, and there's a lot of cliches about this, but I feel like this is an absolute fact. If you haven't tried it, and if you hit a stumbling block, it's not failure. It's you learned that the stumbling block is there, so you don't hit it again next time. There's a way around it, and you just have to keep working until you see the way around it, because otherwise, then you've sat back and you've put your butt in the sand and said, okay, I'm done. That's what failure is. Failure is not moving forward, not giving yourself the benefit of the doubt. Keep pushing along, because the other side, over that speed bump or over that concrete barrier, is exactly where you want to be. And finding out how to get around it is part of the journey. So you're never a failure unless you put your butt in the sand and you never get up again.
Wow.
Awesome.
Wow.
Fantastic. All right. So Ted.
Just the whole theme of this show and the basis around, finding someone who's been there before. Right? I can just see the value in whatever it is that you're trying to do. Those coaches, those mentors, finding someone who's been there before. I've shared in the past that when I first started my company, I sat down with probably 5 different CEOs of IT firms that supported the federal government, and talked to each of them about how they got started. And you'd be surprised at how much people will share with you, share their time, share their experiences with you, if you just ask. And then you take that information and you put together kind of a to-do list from there. So I think it's really important to, find someone that's been there before, and ask the question and see what you can get from there. So that's definitely something I thought is pretty major.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and so my closing thought is a suggestion to anyone that's watching us now, and that you have to get out of your own head. Because we all have our own perspective, right? And we have our idea of what works. Like there's certain things business wise that I'm thinking, you know what, I wouldn't like that, but the customers would love it. Yeah. But I'm so locked in my perspective, and it's taken mentors and people say, hey Eric, you know what, you should really do this, and I do it and it works out great. But if I was if I just stayed in my head, I would never do it. So the bottom line takeaway, I think you'll get stuck less if you really focus on staying out of your head and making sure that you're reaching out to mentors, and especially people that have already done what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right. This has been an outstanding episode of the 30-Minute Hour podcast. And for everyone, you can find us on our website, the30minutehour.net. Don't forget that Wednesdays at 6:00, we do the 30-Minute Hour live on lockdown. That's where we take the lighter side of the lockdown. We've got comedians, we've got perspective from all over the country. So it just adds humor to your day. And we've got a surprise special. Tomorrow at 5:30, we'll be back here live with a bonus episode. That's our time for this week. Until next time, until tomorrow at 5:30, have a great one.